death. Mask up around them and don't get too close if you suspect you might have COVID. Vaccines clearly help to reduce the severity of illness and prevent symptoms in many people. Walk-up vaccines are available from the Cape May County Department of Health. Call 609-465-1187 for more information. We need to learn how to live with COVID, and we can do that most successfully by getting vaccinated and protecting our high-risk family and friends. Call 609-465-1187. Paid for by the County of Cape May.
Okay, so we got the chorizo dumplings, the cucumber empanadas.
Zara's food truck is popping off.
Come on, guys, let's pick it up, all right?
But if she doesn't find a new chef, her truck will be stuck.
Carl quit this morning, so Jessica, I'm gonna need you on the fryer.
Indeed can help her hire great people fast.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. Instant Match instantly connects you with quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your sponsored job description. Visit Indeed.com/credit and get $75 towards your first sponsored job. Terms and conditions apply.
South Jersey's home of the Sports Bash with Mike Gill.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, me too.
WENJ HD Millville, Atlantic City. A Town Square media station serving all of South Jersey. This is 97.3 ESPN. 97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with 97.3 ESPN.com's Andrew DiCecco.
My first allegiance is what will be best for the Philadelphia Eagles and our fans for the next 3, 4, 5 years.
Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by PropSwap, America's sports betting marketplace. Sell your sports bet, take your profit, find out how. PropSwap.com. Download the PropSwap app today. Football at 4. Andrew DiCecco's here. It is Combine week. Let me ask you, Andrew, has the Combine outlived its usefulness for a lot of these players and these teams? Like, I see that some coaches aren't going, some teams, do you think that that the Combine is now more of a made-for-TV situation for the league?
In some ways, yes. You'll see a lot of players, I should say you'll see some players that opt to do their workouts, leave their workouts for their pro day where they're more comfortable, they're in a familiar setting, and they're amongst their teammates, and they're more inclined, obviously, to test better and fare better in their own, in their element. Whereas the NFL Combine is this grand, this big stage event, and it's mostly, like you said, for TV. And you're seeing a lot of players opt out now because they're just, frankly, not comfortable with it. A lot of them will go through the medical part of it to at least have, teams understand where they're at medically. But a lot of them opt to not participate in the on-field drill. Some of them do maybe the 40, or they don't do the 40. They save the 40 for their pro day. So you're seeing a lot of mixed bags, especially over the last few years, I would say.
Yeah, I know that some of the top guys aren't going this year again because of the whole bubble situation. They were like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to opt out. We'll do our Pro Bowl or our pro days, but some of the coaches aren't going. Some guys who it could affect here. You look at the quarterback situation here. Are all the quarterbacks throwing and going through the Combine this week?
From what I understand, there might be a couple that aren't, which, if you're not a top prospect, you better be on doing the throwing, and they want to, evaluators want to see how you're going to perform under intense scrutiny and to guys you're not familiar with throwing to, because obviously going into a situation, you're not going to have any familiarity with your teammates. So they want to see how you are when you're not comfortable. And you're seeing a lot of guys that, maybe feel more comfortable and more apt to, I'm going to throw on my pro day. And that sometimes, if you're not a top prospect, they may raise, some red flags there. So, that's something that you're going to want to watch.
Andrew, what is your take on the whole, Pickett in the hand size? Is this a real thing? Is this something that would bother you?
What was it?
Kenny Pickett's hand size. Do you think that is is that a legit issue?
It didn't affect him in college, really. I think some of those things, Mike, that some of these measurements and some of these things that you're seeing held against certain players are a little bit overblown. And when you really look at it, I mean, you look at the 3-cone drill and DK Metcalf, and there's a lot that was made that his 3-cone drill wasn't very good. And, I think he's fared pretty well for him. So that's just an example of some of these tests that don't necessarily translate onto the field. I mean, it has not hampered Kenny Pickett's production at Pitt, and it's not something that I would anticipate it's all of a sudden going to at the pro level, but it's something to keep an eye on. But I mean, there's really been no reason to have any cause for concern.
Right now, Pickett, the guy who really only had the one big year at Pittsburgh. He was a guy who we were talking earlier before you came on, Andrew. I think if we asked a lot of people in the audience, they probably never heard of the guy before this year. Was he a guy that was on the radar before his big senior season?
Not as a bona fide top quarterback, head of the class type of prospect, Mike. He was somebody that you saw the tools, you saw the intangibles and the potential, but he never really sort of endeared himself to being a blue chip prospect until last season when he really emerged. The same could also be said for Jermaine Johnson on the defensive side, the defensive end, who is really just blew up at the Senior Bowl, has great size at 6'5", 270, and if he's able to put together a strong combine, you're looking at a top 20 prospect. And again, just like Kenny Pickett, he's someone else who really didn't emerge until his final season.
Yeah, and there's a couple of guys. I mean, you go down to Sam Howell, who did emerge earlier in his career. What kind of happened to him that he fell down this board of quarterbacks? Because at the beginning of the year, he was the guy that many thought would have been the number 1 pick in the draft. Now it looks like he could be, the 4th or 5th or maybe even 6th quarterback taken.
Well, it depends on where many of these evaluators see the flaws in his game. Is it timing, which could be, lack of familiarity with teammates, constantly, shuffling in and out? Is it, does it look like he's hesitating or thinking too much and not processing quickly? That could be coaching. That could be, it could be a multitude of things. If it's mechanically, then that's where you really worry about, why did he regress in that, in that manner? But there's certain things that would cause for concern. And then there's other things where, if you're an NFL team and you saw the potential and you figure, let's get this guy in our system and our program, surround him with good coaches and good players, and we'll be able to get the best out of him.
Talking with Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4. By the way, yesterday we had somebody, because the Eagles had Andy Weidel interview for the GM job in Pittsburgh. They would like you to take his scouting spot over, just so you know there. So if you want to get your resume up together there on the scouting side, let's keep your scouting eye going and take a look at some more of these quarterbacks here. I'm looking at, Pickett, Willis, Corral, Howell. They have been the names. Who's the next kind of names for you to keep an eye on this week?
I mean, there's not really any quarterbacks that I would really consider as being in that, even in that echelon.
I asked you that because do you think Philly will look to take a quarterback in the 3rd, 4th, somewhere in the middle rounds?
I mean, it's certainly possible, but I really don't see, given all the needs that they have on their roster right now, and especially on the defensive side of the ball, how they could really justify taking a luxury pick at quarterback, especially a mid-round player, right? They're mostly, high-end backups that you're looking at. In that mold. So I don't know that would be the route that I would go. Maybe Desmond Ridder perhaps might be someone they might be able to look at. Carson Strong, who has knee issues that have really been problematic. You might be able to get him as a value pick. But that's not necessarily you don't just want to throw away one of those important picks in the middle of the rounds, because that's really where you stockpile depth, particularly on the defensive side, where they really don't have any when you go through the depth chart.
All right, I want to move down to defense because a lot of the mock drafts have them going defensive end. Obviously, Hutchinson, Thibodeau. I like Walker. You mentioned Johnson, Karlaftis. Is there a drop off? Where's the drop off? Is it like after 5-ish?
Yeah, I would say so, but that's I mean, right there, that's a very rich, that's a really rich group right there. I mean, knowing the Eagles and their blueprint, pretty much since, forever in investing in the defensive line, the offensive line. You have to think that with one of those 3 first-round picks, one of them is going to be a defensive end. So they're really going to get a premier player that I think has double-digit sack potential and can be a plug-and-play option. But I don't necessarily think that they're going to venture into the second or third round and try and think that they're going to get a starting caliber player. They're knowing that Derek Barnett's going to be a free agent. Ryan Kerrigan's not there. You really only have Josh Sweat that you can count on, which is why I say that defensive end is their most problematic area of concern on the defensive side of the ball, followed by linebacker and corner.
Yep, I agree that, and I think if they keep all 3 picks, you would almost bet everything you got that one of them would be an edge rusher, right?
Yes, I mean, I would even think that their first pick could be an edge rusher. That's the route that I would go. I'm with you. I like Walker. I like his positional versatility. Trayvon Walker from Georgia, the ability to play end or tackle. I think that gives the Eagles a lot of flexibility. I think that gives Jonathan Gannon a lot of flexibility in how he can use him. Like I said before, he can play a 275 or he can play, a 295, 300, depending on where you want him to align. And he's just so athletic and fluid, and doing some of the things that he does at that size, you just don't see. So when you can get a type of athlete like that on your defensive line to go with a guy who also has freakish intangibles in Josh Sweat, I think that would be a tremendous pairing for the Eagles.
All right, who you like better, Ojabo or Walker?
Well, the thing is Ojabo has a very high ceiling, but he's a little bit more of a project, whereas I see Walker as more of a instant impact, plug-and-play type of guy. I think Ojabo has the more freakish athletic intangibles, and I think that his ceiling is immensely higher, but there's also the floor is also lower. You know what I mean? So that said, it's less of a gamble to take a guy like a Trayvon Walker and know that you're going to get a solid contributor, which they really need right now.
What do you think of Ojabo's fit in Gannon's defense? I mean, he's more of an edge outside guy. Does he play down or you stand him up? I mean, does he fit in Gannon's defense as well?
I think he could do both. I think mostly I think he would be like a stand-up rusher. And he's such an interesting prospect, Mike, because going into this, before this season where he really blew up, he only played, I believe it was like 25 or 26 snaps. So, I mean, that's another case of someone, is this really who this player is, or was that year an abnormality? You really need to find out and dig into the film and see why that is, and you want to see how he tests. But I really like his athletic profile, and I think that he projects more to me as like a 3-4 outside linebacker rusher.
I agree. Yeah, that's why I kind of lean towards if they were both on the board at 15 and 16, and I was only taking one, I think I lean towards Walker over Ojabo. But I don't know. We'll see. Let's go to corner. Would be the other spot I guess that they would be in on. This is interesting because I'm starting to see Trent McDuffie's name flying up everywhere. I mean, I feel like every site you look at, Trent McDuffie is all of a sudden flying up the boards. In fact, Kuiper had him going to Philly at 15. So where are you on McDuffie?
15 would be a little high. I have him going after Stingley, Sauce Gardner, Andrew Booth. Then I have Trent McDuffie there. I like Andrew Booth quite a bit. I think I've mentioned him before as just being a very fluid, can flip his hips and run with any receivers of all shapes and sizes, ball magnet, and hasn't scratched the surface of his potential. I really like what he can be and what he can ultimately become, and that's a top-tier lockdown corner at the next level. And I think that you're going to get a value. I think, it's odd to say that a first-round pick is going to be a value, but I think that he's getting overlooked by Stingley and Sauce Gardner, and I think that Booth is ultimately going to be the better player. I think they're going to be have long, successful careers in the NFL, but I really like what Andrew Booth has from a skill set standpoint.
Yeah, and then you got McDuffie, his teammate Gordon, at number 5 by some people. And then the next group of guys I like, though. I like McCreary. I like Elam. I like Marcus Jones. So I think there's some depth at corner that you should watch this week.
Yeah, absolutely. Roger McCreary is somebody that I think could help himself at the combine immensely and could make a late push for the top 25, first round. Elam's another player, very physical. That stands out when you watch him. He's a little handsy, a little grabby. You wonder how that's going to translate to the pro level, but there's a lot to like there. I think he's a little bit more raw when you're kind of comparing him to the players that we've mentioned. But I mean, yeah, the corner's pretty rich. Even at the top of the second round, where the Eagles are picking, you can still get a good player there. But I think that it sort of behooves them to take one of those premier guys, one of those top 3 guys, when you have the opportunity in the first round, because they really need a solid lockdown corner opposite Darius Slay, and then ultimately to take his place when Darius Slay moves on.
Combine week, we're looking at some of the guys you should keep an eye on this week that might be in Howie Roseman's eyesight right now, and the safeties position, I don't think first round would be a spot there. Kyle Hamilton. Is there any other first round safety that you think is available?
First round safety? I think that you might see a guy like Jaquan Brisker from Penn State make a push. He could also be one of those guys that slides in at the back of the first and go to a team that has a luxury pick there. I think he's ultimately going to be a very high-end second-round pick. Lewis Seen from Georgia is another player that I like there. So, I mean, I think the Eagles might want to look at 54 and get that safety spot solidified because, like I mentioned, the depth chart is just Marcus Epps and Kayvon Wallace. Obviously, Rodney McLeod and Anthony Harris are free agents to be. So you really need to figure out what's going to happen there at safety, and I think you need to sign one, and you need to add a player through the draft to really solidify that position.
All right. Speaking of adding a player through the draft, we know Boston Scott, Jordan Howard are free agents right now. You got Sanders and Gainwell. So fourth round, I'm imagining running back could be coming into play here.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote about this on InsideTheBirds.com. If I had to guess, Mike, I would say right around pick 121 would be an area in which they could possibly address that. I don't see them going any earlier. Maybe not pick 83 or anything like that. But that said, there's a couple players there that would be good fits for the Eagles and a good rotational complement to Miles Sanders and possibly more down the line. Dameon Pierce from Florida, Tyrell Algier from BYU. And there's a couple of other players that I like, but they're mostly 5th or 6th round. Sincere McCormick from UTSA. I like him a lot. University of Texas San Antonio running back. He's a 5'9", 205, but he really has the contact balance and moves the pile as a downhill runner, but he also has the speed and elusiveness to, stretch the perimeter and take it up the sideline. He's a player that I think is going to be a tremendous value pick for somebody, possibly the Eagles. So, and when you look at what they have there, Miles Sanders could very well be moving on after next season. And Jordan Howard is somebody that you could let him test the free agent waters, and he might be like maybe a May or June signing if you really need him. I think he's going to be out there. He has an extensive injury history, and he is 28 years old. So the running back's a position that's sort of quietly crept up, and now they all of a sudden they need to restock the cupboard.
Yeah, I like Algier a lot. I'm glad you brought him up. I think because he's a guy that you can give him he's a workhorse guy. He's like 220 pounds. Yeah. He's a big dude.
Yeah, he had over 420 carries, I think, over the last 2 seasons or something crazy like that. And he's been very productive for them. You remember him there with Zach Wilson, of course. That really high-octane offense that he had really cut his teeth as a downhill runner, Mike, but he does have straight-line speed, not very elusive or agile. He's not going to, bounce it outside and take too many runs to the house, but he has a good skill set, and I think he can ultimately be a very strong number 2 running back in the NFL.
Of course, it helps that I saw him play Utah State that night, and I think he had like 230 yards in that game. So I watched that game, and I think Virginia, he ran for almost 300 yards. I'm like, is this the same guy?
Yeah,
right? Am I right about that?
He's a he's a very productive player, and that's why I think that slotting right there in that 4th round, you know how running backs tend to drop regardless of their talent level. I think that you might be able to get a really strong player there that can kind of fit in, and it would be an upgrade over a Boston Scott. You know what I mean? And I think and Jordan Howard for that matter, and would be a good 1-2 punch with Miles Sanders next season.
Okay, wide out at this week's combine. If you're not getting a guy in the first round, and some people are torn on this, you draft a 3rd first-round guy, I know we've talked before, but who are some of the guys that you like maybe in that third round area?
Well, Jalen Tolbert from South Alabama is a player I've been on for a couple seasons now. I really like what he's been able to. He's grown tremendously over the past couple of seasons. Started to emerge a little bit 2 years ago, and then really took it to the next level this year. Made some tough catches against some top schools. The top school that he went against. 6'3", 190, can be that contested catch specialist. Can affect all three areas of the field. Physical, good releases off the line. And I think that he's someone else that has sort of seen his draft stock vault a little bit. And all of a sudden he was, looked at as a late third sleeper prospect. And all of a sudden he's not really a sleeper anymore. And he's starting to creep up draft boards there. So if he's sitting there at 83 and I'm the Eagles, I'm considering it strongly. But I really do think that it's going to be in that, given the fact that the Eagles have drafted J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, Jalen Reagor, Devontae Smith, I think that they would still look to maybe either sign a free agent receiver and then maybe draft one in that fourth or fifth round. So in that area, you'd be looking at a Romeo Doubs from Nevada, Danny Gray, who I like a lot from SMU, who is a really smooth route runner, another guy that can affect all three levels of the field, good releases, catches the ball well, can play inside or outside, needs to develop his play strength a little bit. I think he's only 182 pounds, so but he does have room in that frame to add more, strength. So he's another player that I like that I really do think is going to climb some draft boards here.
There's the kid from Cincinnati, Alec Pierce. Is he one of those guys that's going to get drafted late, and we're going to be like, hey, here we go? Because he's one of those guys that's got good size, man, but it seems like he's just one that nobody's talking about.
Yeah, I added him. He's the last name I added in my article, and he's a player that I would say keep an eye on. I think that he's another guy that, you always see some of these guys late in the draft process, their names sort of emerge in early April, and they blow up their pro day, or they just have insane testing. Well, I think Alec Pierce is going to be somebody that teams are going to become enamored with, just from an IQ standpoint, from his size. He has terrific size, and they're going to look and see what he can, see him as a viable red zone option right off the bat. And I think that he's going to be somebody that we're going to be talking about as being one of those mid-round sleepers soon enough. I don't think he's going to be considered a sleeper for too long.
Yep, I agree. If you watch a lot of their, Cincinnati was obviously, a smaller conference, but you saw them a lot this year. Had a couple of big games. One was against Notre Dame. Had about 150 yards in the game against Notre Dame. He just feels like one of them guys, I don't want to say like Cooper Kupp, but kind of, we knew Kupp was going to go in the third round, even though he turned out to be, I don't know, he had one of the best seasons in the history of the NFL this year. It was like, this guy's going to be a third-round pick. It feels like they were just pegged into that spot. I feel a guy like Pierce is almost pegged into a spot, and you might get tremendous value. So keep an eye on a guy like that this week at the Combine as well. For more, check out Andrew DiCecco over at InsideTheBirds.com, DiCecco NFL, and he does a great job on all this draft stuff. The Combine this week, we'll recap it all coming up next week, and then we'll be fully into draft season here on the Sports Bash Football at 4. Andrew, great conversation, man.
Absolutely, man. Talk soon.
All right, that's Andrew DiCecco from InsideTheBirds.com, the Inside the Birds podcast.